November 26, 1926. Herstal, Belgium. Inside the FN factory, the production floor was quiet except for the usual rhythm of machinery. At a workbench stood John Moses Browning, the most influential firearms designer the world had ever known. In the middle of his work, Browning collapsed and died. He was 71 years old. Resting on the table in front of him was an unfinished pistol, incomplete, its final form still unresolved. The design, though unfinished, already hinted at something extraordinary. It carried 13 rounds at a time when most military pistols held only 7 or 8. The internal mechanism was simpler, the frame was lighter, and if anyone could complete it properly, this pistol had the potential to redefine what a military sidearm could be. The problem was simple and devastating. Browning had never written everything down. Most of the design lived only in his mind. 14 years later, German armored columns rolled into Belgium. The FN factory was seized, almost intact. Inside, German forces discovered the completed version of Browning's final pistol. It was now known as the High Power. The occupying authorities immediately recognized its value and ordered it into production for the Wehrmacht. Over the next 4 years, occupied Belgium would manufacture more than 300,000 high-power pistols for Nazi Germany. At the very same time, across the English Channel, the man who had actually finished Browning's work was fighting his own battle. He was attempting to recreate full production drawings almost entirely from memory so the Allies could manufacture the pistol themselves. This is the story of how an unfinished sketch left behind by a dead American engineer became the most influential combat pistol of the 20th century, how it ended up arming both sides of the same war, and why British Special Forces quietly sought it out while the regular British Army stubbornly refused to abandon their revolvers. The story truly begins in 1921, when the French military issued a formal requirement for a new service pistol. What they wanted was unlike anything currently in service. The specifications demanded a minimum magazine capacity of 10 rounds. The caliber had to be 9mm or larger. The pistol needed an effective range of 50 meters and a total weight under 1 kilogram. At the time, no handgun in existence could meet those demands. The standard Colt 1911 held only 7 rounds. The German Luger carried 8. The British Webley revolver held just 6 rounds. Even with its quick top-break reload, it was still at a severe disadvantage.
To understand the implications, consider the reality of a sidearm fight in 1921. A British officer carrying a Webley had 6 shots. A German officer armed with a Luger had 8. If both emptied their weapons, the German officer possessed a 33% ammunition advantage, but the French were aiming much higher. They wanted their officers to carry a pistol that offered roughly 60% more ammunition than their German counterparts before needing to reload. No existing firearm design came close to meeting that goal. John Browning, working from his shop in Ogden, Utah, immediately recognized the opportunity. He had already designed the Colt 1911, but he had sold those patents and could not legally replicate his own work. That forced him to start from a clean slate, a completely new pistol, a completely new approach. The decisive breakthrough did not come from Browning alone. It came from his collaborator at FN, a Belgian engineer named Dieudonné Save. Save developed a solution that today seems obvious, but at the time had never been successfully implemented in a military pistol: a double-stack magazine. Instead of cartridges sitting in a single vertical column, Save's design staggered them into 2 columns that merged into one at the top. This nearly doubled ammunition capacity without dramatically increasing grip size. The geometry was elegant. A traditional single-stack magazine chambered in 9mm could only fit 7 or 8 rounds within a grip that remained comfortable for soldiers. Save's staggered magazine managed to fit 13 rounds into a grip only slightly wider. The finished pistol weighed approximately 900 grams unloaded, just under the French requirement. Its overall length was about 200 millimeters. Muzzle velocity varied depending on ammunition, typically landing in the mid-300s meters per second. On paper, the pistol met or exceeded every demand laid out by the French military. On June 28, 1923, Browning filed his patent and built 2 working prototypes. He then began traveling regularly to Belgium to continue development at FN's facilities. Over the next 3 years, he made repeated trips, refining the design, correcting feeding issues, and improving the trigger system. But he would never see the pistol completed. After Browning's death, the responsibility for finishing the pistol fell almost entirely on Dieudonné Save. For the next 8 years, he worked to complete what Browning had started. Progress was slow, not because the design lacked promise, but because of legal and technical constraints. Many of Browning's earlier innovations were still protected by Colt patents, limiting what Save could legally incorporate. That changed in 1928 when those patents finally expired. With that barrier gone, Save was free to refine the pistol using solutions Browning himself had pioneered years earlier. One of the most important changes was internal. Save replaced the swinging barrel link with a shaped cam cut directly into the barrel. This simplified manufacturing, reduced parts count, and increased reliability under harsh conditions. It was cheaper to produce and easier to maintain in military service. By 1934, the design was finally complete. FN designated it the P-35, referencing its planned year of adoption, and full production began in 1935. Then came the first irony in the pistol's long history. France, the country that had initiated the entire project back in 1921, rejected it. Instead, the French military selected a domestic family of pistols, known as the Model 1935 series. The handgun designed precisely to meet French requirements would never serve as a standard French sidearm. FN gave the pistol a commercial name, the Browning High Power. The name did not refer to muzzle energy or ballistic force, it referred to capacity. High power meant high ammunition count. 13 rounds, nearly double what most service pistols carried at the time. By May 1940, FN had produced approximately 56,000 high-power pistols. Most were delivered to Belgium and China. Then, on May 10, 1940, Germany invaded Belgium. The FN factory fell almost immediately, captured virtually intact within 2 days. German authorities quickly understood what they had acquired. The factory was placed under direct control, and production resumed under occupation. The high power received a German military designation, pistol.B. The letter B indicated Belgian origin. Procurement records show that these pistols were often issued not to standard infantry units, but to elite formations. Waffen SS units and Fallschirmjäger paratroopers were frequent recipients. In German service, elite units were expected to carry elite weapons. Over the next 4 years, the occupied FN factory manufactured roughly 300,000 high-power pistols for Nazi Germany. As the war dragged on, quality inevitably declined. Late war examples often lacked polish. Some omitted the magazine disconnect safety, likely to speed production. There are persistent claims that Belgian workers deliberately sabotaged pistols through improper heat treatment. While such stories align with resistance lore, definitive primary documentation remains elusive. The strangest consequence of this parallel production emerged in September 1944 during Operation Market Garden. At Arnhem, British paratroopers of the 1st Airborne Division fought Waffen SS units across the bridge. According to multiple anecdotal accounts, soldiers on both sides may have been armed with high powers manufactured in the same Belgian factory. The same pistol, the same caliber, the same 13-round magazine, pointed at each other across a Dutch river. While Germany exploited the captured factory, Save was planning his escape. His journey out of occupied Europe leads less like an engineering memoir and more like a spy novel. In mid-1941, with assistance from the Belgian resistance, Save fled south through occupied France, crossed into neutral Spain, then moved on to Portugal. From there, he reached England by ship. The journey took weeks. German agents monitored borders. Vichy French police inspected documents at every checkpoint. Save arrived in Britain without complete blueprints. Some drawings were still hidden in Belgium. Others existed only in his memory. At the Royal Small Arms Factory Design Department in Enfield, he began the painstaking task of reconstructing full production specifications. He relied on partial documents, a handful of pre-war pistols already in Britain, and his own recollection of dimensions refined over more than a decade.
Imagine recreating industrial-scale blueprints for a precision weapon from memory. Save did exactly that. By June 1943, British engineers had adapted his drawings for mass production. But Britain faced a problem. Its factories were already stretched to the limit, producing Lee Enfield rifles, Sten guns, and Bren guns. There was no spare industrial capacity to introduce a new pistol line. The solution would come from Canada. The answer to Britain's manufacturing problem was found across the Atlantic. In Toronto, a company called Inglis had survived the economic collapse of the Great Depression by reinventing itself. In 1937, a businessman named Major James Hahn purchased the struggling firm and redirected it toward precision industrial work. When war came, Inglis secured a major contract to manufacture the Bren light machine gun. By 1943, the company was producing nearly 60% of all Bren guns used by British and Commonwealth forces. Inglis had modern machinery, skilled labor, and, most importantly, available capacity. In April 1943, China submitted a request through the Canadian Mutual Aid Program for 180,000 Browning high-power pistols. The Chinese military wanted a very specific configuration. These pistols were to be fitted with tangent rear sights graduated out to 500 meters and a slot in the grip to accept a wooden shoulder stock, similar to the Mauser's C96. From a practical standpoint, these sights were wildly optimistic. At such distances, pistol accuracy was theoretical at best. But the Chinese authorities insisted, and the contract moved forward. FN agreed to license production to Inglis in exchange for a royalty of 25 cents per pistol, payable after the war. Save, along with another Belgian engineer, René Levine, traveled to Toronto to assist with tooling, setup, and quality control. Production officially began in February 1944. Inglis manufactured two primary variants. The first was the #1 MK1, equipped with tangent sights and stock slot intended for the Chinese contract. These pistols carried a CH serial prefix. The second was the #2 MK1, built with fixed sights, a parkerized finish, and checkered bakelite grips. These pistols carried a T serial prefix and were designated for British and Commonwealth forces. The Chinese contract collapsed abruptly in September 1944 due to political and logistical complications. Only about 4,000 pistols had reached China by that point. The remaining Chinese pattern pistols, already manufactured or in production, were redirected to British and Commonwealth units. By the time production ended in October 1945, Inglis had manufactured approximately 151,816 high-power pistols. This brings us to one of the most commonly repeated claims surrounding the high power, that it was the preferred pistol of the French resistance. Here, the historical record demands precision rather than legend. The British Special Operations Executive, the organization responsible for arming and supporting resistance movements across occupied Europe, did indeed request large numbers of Inglis high powers. Approximately 40 to 50,000 were delivered to Britain during 1944 and 1945. But documentation shows that these pistols were primarily issued to SOE agents and Jedburgh teams, small, highly trained units parachuted into occupied territory to organize, advise, and coordinate resistance cells. Confirmed records show that Jedburgh operatives carried a mix of weapons. These included Webley Mark III revolvers, Enfield No. 2 revolvers, and Inglis-made Browning high powers in 9mm. The choice often depended on availability and personal preference, rather than formal doctrine. What the evidence does not support is the idea that the French resistance specifically demanded the high power above all other weapons. In June 1944 alone, SOE supply records indicate that British aircraft delivered nearly 10,000 Sten guns, with approximately 8 million rounds of 9mm ammunition, more than 8,000 pistols of various unspecified types, over 5,000 rifles, more than 5,000 M1 carbines, and over 2,000 Bren guns to resistance groups in France. The Sten gun, not the pistol, became the defining weapon of the Maquis. It was cheap, compact, easily concealed, chambered in the same 9mm ammunition used by German forces, and simple enough to be manufactured in clandestine workshops. Pistols represented only a small fraction of total arms drops, and the high power was just one of several pistol types supplied. The idea that the French resistance overwhelmingly favored the high power appears to be a product of post-war enthusiast mythology rather than primary source documentation. Where the high power truly mattered was not in mass resistance distribution, but in the hands of individual operatives working alone or in small teams behind enemy lines. For these agents, the pistol offered real, measurable advantages. 13 rounds compared to 6 in a revolver meant more than double the available firepower before reloading. In ambushes, escape attempts, or compromised safe houses, those extra rounds could mean survival.
Chambered in 9mm, the high power allowed agents to resupply from captured German ammunition, the same cartridge used in Sten guns and MP-40 submachine guns. An operative could scavenge ammunition from fallen enemies or raid German depots without relying on external supply lines. Compared to the American Colt 1911, the trade-off was clear. The .45 caliber round offered greater stopping power, but the pistol carried only 7 rounds and weighed more. An SOE agent armed with a high power carried nearly twice the ammunition in a lighter, flatter weapon that concealed more easily under civilian clothing. For an operative operating without resupply, capacity was not a luxury, it was insurance. Many agents reportedly cached their pistols shortly after landing. The risk of discovery during German searches often outweighed the benefits of carrying a handgun at all times. These cached weapons sometimes found their way into the hands of local partisan fighters, one indirect pathway through which high powers entered resistance circulation. But this was opportunistic redistribution, not structured supply. The British regular army, meanwhile, remained deeply conservative about sidearms. Revolvers were viewed as sturdier, simpler, and more reliable than semi-automatics. This institutional mindset persisted well beyond the Second World War. The high power was not rejected because it was ineffective. It was sidelined because pistols themselves were not considered strategically important by conventional military planners. Special operations forces disagreed.
Specialized units that actually relied on pistols for survival adopted the high power without hesitation. British special forces, commandos, and airborne units understood something regular army leadership did not. A sidearm used in clandestine warfare was not ceremonial. It was a last resort lifeline. The Special Air Service made the Browning high power their standard pistol from the Second World War onward, retaining it through the Cold War and into the early 1990s. That alone speaks volumes about the weapon's practical value. By March 1945, the British 6th Airborne Division had received large numbers of Inglis-produced high powers in preparation for Operation Varsity. This massive airborne assault over the Rhine was the largest single-day airborne operation in history. More than 16,000 paratroopers were dropped east of the river to establish bridgeheads into Germany. For troops landing behind enemy lines, a high-capacity, reliable pistol was not an accessory, it was a necessity. Commandos valued the high power for precisely the reasons that had driven its original design. 13 rounds offered flexibility under pressure. The pistol could be reloaded quickly. It could share ammunition with submachine guns, and it functioned reliably under harsh field conditions. These were not theoretical advantages, they were operational realities. For missions requiring complete deniability, the Special Operations Executive favored purpose-built sterile weapons, such as the well-rod suppressed pistol. These firearms were manufactured without serial numbers or identifying marks, designed for silent assassinations rather than sustained fighting. The high power filled a different role. It was the sidearm chosen when firepower mattered more than silence. After the war, the high power's reputation only expanded. In 1980, during the Iranian embassy siege in London, television cameras captured SAS operators storming the building armed with Browning high powers. The images were broadcast worldwide. Overnight, the pistol became a symbol of elite counter-terrorism forces. Once again, history repeated itself in 1982 during the Falklands War. British troops carried L9A1 high powers. Argentine forces carried FM-manufactured pistols produced under license from FN. The same design faced itself across another battlefield, echoing the strange symmetry seen decades earlier in Europe. The high power's true legacy, however, emerged in the decades after World War II. More than 50 armies across 93 countries adopted the pistol in one form or another. It became, outside the United States, what the Colt 1911 was to American forces, the default military sidearm. The British Armed Forces finally adopted the high power officially in 1954. They would retain it until 2013, a service life of 59 years. Canada held on to its English pattern pistols even longer, keeping them in service until 2024, nearly 80 years after production began. Few military firearms of any category can claim such longevity. SIVE's double-column magazine became the blueprint for every modern combat pistol that followed. The Beretta 92, the CZ75, the SIG P226, the Glock 17, all trace their lineage directly to the high power's magazine geometry. Browning's short recoil tilting barrel system appears in the overwhelming majority of semi-automatic pistols manufactured today. Some historians argue that the pistol should be credited more to Dieudonné Sive than to Browning, given how much work remained after Browning's death. Others maintain that without Browning's foundational architecture, the design could never have existed. What cannot be disputed is that the two men together created a weapon that outlived both of them by generations. In 2018, FN announced the end of original high-power production, closing one of the longest continuous handgun manufacturing runs in history. A modernized version was reintroduced in 2022, but with altered internals and updated engineering. The original Browning Sive mechanism, refined but fundamentally unchanged since 1935, had finally reached the end of its journey. That journey began at a workbench in her stall in November 1926. John Moses Browning lay dead at 71 years old, his final design incomplete before him. He could not have known that a Belgian engineer would spend 8 years finishing his work, then flee Nazi occupation to recreate production drawings from memory in England. He could not have known that his pistol would arm both sides of a world war, manufactured in the same factory for enemies facing each other across European battlefields. He could not have known that his 13-round magazine would define military pistol capacity for the next half-century. The high power was not dismissed as useless. It was not the most requested weapon of the French resistance. Those claims collapse under examination of primary sources. What is documented, verified, and supported by production records is something far more significant. It was the first successful high-capacity military pistol. It was the template for modern handgun design, and it was the preferred sidearm of British Special Forces who understood that in clandestine warfare, ammunition capacity saves lives. Browning died before finishing it. Sive completed it. Canadian workers built it. British commandos carried it. 93 nations adopted it.
The numbers confirm it. The documents support it. British engineering, refined by Belgian genius, manufactured in Canadian factories, created a pistol that shaped every combat handgun that followed. That is not legend. That is verified history.